My parents never noticed I moved to another state, until my dad called, threatening to cut my college funds. I just laughed. If I disappeared from this world, would they even notice? That question haunted me throughout my entire childhood. Not in a fleeting, passing way, but like a shadow that clung to me every second of every day. I don't know when I first realized that I was invisible in my own home. Maybe I always was. The Carter family had 3 important people: Dad, Mom, and Tyler. I wasn't one of them. I was just a background character in their lives. My dad, Richard Carter, was the kind of man who demanded control over everything. A strict, disciplined man who cared more about his reputation than his own family. To him, there was only one son, the golden child, the heir to the Carter name, Tyler. My mom, Susan Carter, well, she just followed whatever my dad wanted. She never argued, never objected. If ignoring me meant keeping the peace, she did it without hesitation. And then there was Tyler Carter, 3 years younger than me. Bright blue eyes, golden hair, and a smile that could fool anyone into thinking he was an angel. To my parents, he was perfect. To everyone else, he was charming. But to me, he was a nightmare. I wasn't just his shadow, I was his plaything. I can still remember the small, bitter moments that taught me my place. On my 6th birthday, I got a cheap plastic toy car. Tyler got an entire collection of model race cars, complete with a track that lit up. When I graduated elementary school with straight A's, Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. But when Tyler brought home a messy, scribbled drawing, it got framed and put up in the living room. And when Tyler broke my gaming console, I was the one who got yelled at for leaving my things out. Tyler didn't even get a slap on the wrist. But there was one moment that truly changed me. I was maybe 10 or 11 when I finally asked my mom, "Why don't you ever care about me?" She barely looked up, just gave me a tired smile and said, "You're the older child, Nathan. You don't need as much attention as Tyler." That was the moment I understood. I wasn't necessary. Tyler made sure I never forgot it. He turned my life into a constant war, one that I was never allowed to win. He set me up to take the blame for things he did. Stole my clothes, my toys, my moments. Even at school, he made sure I had no peace because he knew no one would ever take my side. I learned to be silent, to endure it all, because fighting back was pointless. But I also knew one thing. I couldn't live like this forever. There was only one way out. I had to leave. For good. Freedom wasn't just a dream anymore. It was real. It was possible. I had found my way out of this hell. A full-ride scholarship to one of the most prestigious universities in another state. My golden ticket. A chance to step into a world where I wasn't just Nathan Carter, the forgotten son. A place where no one would compare me to Tyler, where I could finally be more than just a shadow. For the first time in my life, I had something they couldn't take away from me. I still remember the moment I told them. I sat across from my parents at the dinner table, gripping the letter tightly. My voice was steady, but my heart was pounding. "I got accepted," I said, looking straight at them. "A full scholarship. I'll be leaving for college in the fall." Silence. Then my dad scoffed, shaking his head like I had just told a bad joke. "You think you're that special?" he muttered. Mom didn't even look up from her plate. "You can't go," she said flatly. "Tyler will feel bad if his older brother is more successful than him." I felt the blood drain from my face. Across from me, Tyler leaned back in his chair, smirking, his blue eyes glinting with amusement, like he already knew how this was going to end. I looked between them, waiting for someone, anyone, to realize how insane this was, but no one did. That was when it hit me. They didn't want me to stay because they cared. They wanted me to stay because they couldn't stand the thought of me winning. So, I did what I had always done. I pretended to accept it. Lowered my head, nodded obediently. "You're right," I said softly. "I should stay." My dad smirked. "Good. At least you know your place." "I'll enroll in the local college," I continued. "But I want to live in the dorms. It'll help me focus." He shrugged. "Fine. Just don't waste my money." Tyler's smirk widened. He thought he had won, that I was still trapped under his feet. They had no idea what was really happening. I had already accepted the scholarship. Already arranged everything. I wasn't staying in this town. I wasn't even staying in this state. The tuition was covered. I didn't need a cent from them, but I still let them send me money. After all, they owed me for every year of neglect. Every moment they made me feel like I was nothing. This wasn't just escape. This was payback. The day I left, no one even came to see me off. Dad handed me an envelope with a few $100, barely looking up from his work. Mom told me to study hard, like I was just heading off to another school day. Tyler didn't even glance up from his phone. No hugs, no goodbyes, no sign that they would miss me. They still thought I was coming back. I stepped onto that plane with nothing but a suitcase and the lightest heart I had ever felt. The weight was gone. The chains were broken. For the first time in my life, I was free. But deep down, I knew. One day, they would realize the truth. And when that day came, I wouldn't be invisible anymore. The first day at my university felt like stepping into an entirely new world. For the first time, I wasn't Tyler Carter's useless older brother. No one looked at me with disappointment. No whispers followed me down the hall. I was just Nathan Carter. No more shadows, no more expectations weighing me down. I could finally breathe. I threw myself into my studies with everything I had. I knew what it took to succeed. I had spent my whole life fighting to be noticed, to be enough. Now, with no one holding me back, I worked 10 times harder than anyone else. By the end of my first year, I was at the top of my class. Professors knew my name. Companies sent me internship offers. Opportunities opened up in ways I had never imagined. Meanwhile, back home, my parents still thought I was just another struggling college kid in some local school. And honestly, I didn't care. Keeping up the lie was surprisingly easy. A few phone calls here and there, mostly short and vague. Yeah, classes are tough, but I'm managing. No, I don't need money. The scholarship helps. I'll try to visit soon. Been really busy. They never pressed for details. They never asked about my classes, my friends, my life. As long as I played my part, they didn't care to look deeper. Holidays were trickier. I made a point to come home once or twice a year, just enough to keep up appearances. I kept the visits short, claiming I had to get back early for assignments. Every time, the house felt smaller, colder. Dad barely acknowledged me, too wrapped up in Tyler's latest accomplishments. Mom fussed over Tyler like he was still a child. And Tyler? He acted like I didn't exist, except when he needed to feel superior. So, still wasting time with books, huh? He'd sneer, as if his own life had amounted to anything. They never questioned where I was really living. Never noticed the way I carried myself differently, more confident, more sure of my place in the world. They had spent so long ignoring me that it never even occurred to them that I might have outgrown them. By the time I was 20, I had finished my degree in 2 years instead of 4. Before my so-called family even realized, I had landed a job at one of the top financial firms in the country. 6-figure salary, a high-rise apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, and the kind of freedom I had only dreamed of. I had everything I had ever worked for. Meanwhile, Tyler was still at home, living off our parents, drifting from one failed project to another. Yet in their eyes, he was still the golden child, the pride of the Carter family. And me? I didn't exist. I should have been happy. I had won. I had proved that I was more than just a forgotten son. But some nights, staring out at the city lights from my apartment, I felt an emptiness I didn't expect. I had everything, but I had no one. I had spent my whole life chasing success, thinking it would make up for what I never had. But no matter how much I achieved, there was still a part of me that wondered, would they ever care? Would there ever be a day when they truly saw me? Or would I only matter when they needed something from me? I never expected that day to come so soon. And when it did, it wasn't anything like I had imagined. One morning, my phone rang. That alone wasn't surprising. I had emails, work calls, and reminders flooding my screen every day. But when I glanced at the caller ID, I froze. Richard Carter, DAD. For 3 years, he had never called me. Not once. Not for my birthday, not for holidays, not even to check if I was still alive. And yet, here he was. I stared at the screen, half tempted to let it ring out. But curiosity got the better of me. Why now? I answered, bringing the phone to my ear. Nathan, My father's voice came through, firm and commanding as ever. You need to come home. I didn't say anything. I just waited. Waited for him to say something that would make me feel like I actually mattered. But of course he didn't. It's Tyler's wedding, he continued. You need to be there. I almost laughed. Almost. After 3 years of silence, the only reason he called was because they needed me to be another prop in their picture-perfect family image. Not because he missed me, not because he cared how I was doing, just because I was supposed to be there. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temple. So, let me get this straight. You don't call me for 3 years and the first time you do, it's to tell me to show up for his wedding? His voice sharpened. Don't make this difficult. You're his brother. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Am I? A long silence stretched between us. Then, I decided to push. You want me to come back? Fine. But tell me something, Dad. Do you even know where I live? More silence. That told me everything I needed to know. He had no idea. He had never even bothered to check. When I didn't immediately say yes, my mother entered the picture. Her number popped up an hour later, and I already knew how this was going to go before I even answered. Nathan, she sighed, her voice dripping with disappointment. Do you really want to embarrass the family like this? I rolled my eyes. By not going to a wedding for a brother who doesn't even acknowledge my existence? You know Tyler wants you there, she pressed. We all do. No matter what, family is family. Family. That word meant nothing coming from her. I stayed quiet, waiting for the next guilt trip. It didn't take long. Sweetheart, your father and I have always supported you. We sent you money. We helped with your college expenses. The least you can do is... I cut her off. Mom, Dad hasn't paid for anything since I left. Silence. I could practically hear the confusion on her end. I leaned forward, voice calm but sharp. I graduated over a year ago. I have a 6-figure job. I make more money than Dad ever has. I let you send me money because I figured, after all those years of being treated like nothing, you owed me at least that much. Dead silence. Then, suddenly, the floodgates opened. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, texts, voicemails, all from them. They weren't calling to apologize. They were calling because, for the first time, they realized they had no control over me anymore. And the best part? This was only the beginning. The morning after that call, I knew my father wouldn't just let it go. Richard Carter wasn't the type of man to accept being outmaneuvered, especially not by his own son, and I was right. As I sipped my coffee, my phone lit up with a flood of missed calls from my mother. Then came the first text. Where are you? Why did the university say you never studied there? I smirked. So he finally found out. Apparently, my father had marched straight to the local university, fully prepared to cancel my enrollment as some kind of punishment for refusing to come home. He probably imagined himself walking into the office, demanding to speak with administration, expecting to see my name in their system. But instead, they had stared at him in confusion. Sorry, sir, but we don't have a student named Nathan Carter in our records. That must have been the moment everything shattered for him. I could picture it. The way his face must have twisted, how his fingers probably clenched into fists as he realized the truth, that he had no control, that I had played him for 3 entire years. The man who prided himself on running his household like a business, who always believed he was the smartest in the room, had been completely outplayed by the son he ignored, and now he was humiliated. Not long after, my phone rang again. Dad, I let it ring a few times before answering, keeping my voice calm. Morning, Dad. Something wrong? His voice came through, a mix of rage and disbelief. Where the hell are you? What did you do with the money I sent you? I leaned back, stretching out my legs. Oh, that. Yeah, thanks for that. It really helped cover some nice expenses while I was getting my degree. Silence. Then I dropped the real bombshell. I graduated over a year ago, by the way. Got into an elite university on a full scholarship. Been working for a top firm ever since. Oh, and just so you know, my salary is about 10 times what you make. More silence. For the first time in my life, Richard Carter was speechless. But it didn't last long. When he finally spoke again, his voice was a dangerous growl. You ungrateful little bastard. You lied to us. You betrayed this family. I let out a short laugh. Betrayed? Dad, let's be honest. You never gave a damn about me to begin with. The only reason you're mad is because I slipped out of your control. His breathing was heavy now, probably gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. I did everything for you, he spat. I rolled my eyes. You mean you did everything for Tyler? Silence again. I imagined him standing there, fists clenched, face red with fury, struggling to come up with an argument that didn't exist. But I didn't care anymore, because for the first time I wasn't afraid of him, and I had no idea that this was only the beginning of the nightmare that was about to unfold for the Carter family. 2 days passed before my mother called again, but this time she wasn't yelling. She was crying. Nathan, I miss you. I just want our family to go back to how it used to be. For a moment I hesitated. A small part of me, buried deep, barely alive, wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that, after all these years, she finally cared. But then reality set in. This was the same woman who ignored me for most of my life. The same woman who defended Tyler every time he hurt me. And now, after 3 years of silence, she suddenly missed me? Something was wrong. I didn't believe her. So I called my aunt, one of the few people in the family who had never sided with my parents. And what she told me made my blood run cold. Tyler was gone, and so was his fiancée. It turned out she had never planned on marrying him. She had tricked my parents into investing their entire savings into a high-return business deal, one that didn't actually exist. Once the money was gone, so was she. She had drained everything they had. And the worst part? My parents had been so desperate to secure Tyler's future that they had mortgaged the house for even more investment money. Now, they had nothing. They were about to lose the house. My father's business was already collapsing due to legal troubles, and this was the final nail in the coffin. The Carter family, the same family that had once treated me like an unwanted burden, was now completely ruined. But the real irony? For the first time in his life, Tyler wasn't the golden child anymore. With everything falling apart, my parents turned on him. You brought her into this family, my father had apparently screamed. This is your fault. You ruined us, Tyler, my mother had sobbed. The same parents who once worshipped him were now blaming him for everything. He had gone from the perfect son to the disgrace in a matter of days. And just like that, Tyler Carter became invisible. And me, the son they had ignored? I was suddenly the only hope they had left. A week later, I got the final surprise. Somehow they had found my address. When I opened the door, there they were, my father, once a proud and intimidating man, now looking small and exhausted. My mother, pale and desperate. They weren't the same people I had grown up with. They were broken. For the first time in my life, I saw Richard Carter lower his head in front of me. Nathan, you're our only hope, his voice cracked. Please, help us. I stared at them, my mind completely blank. Did they actually regret what they had done to me? Or was I just their last resort, their lifeline now that Tyler had failed them? And more importantly, did they deserve my help? After years of treating me like I was invisible, they now stood at my doorstep, tired, broken, desperate. Richard Carter, the man who once looked down on me, was now hunched over, pleading. Susan Carter, the woman who never had time for me, had tears streaming down her face. But I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no pity. Just emptiness. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe, waiting. Finally, my father spoke, his voice strained. Nathan, you're our only hope. I let out a short, hollow laugh. They tried to justify it, to rewrite history. We never meant to treat you unfairly, my mother said, voice shaking. Families go through rough patches, misunderstandings. We can start over, my father added. Fix things. Be a family again. I stared at them, unimpressed. Once I might have believed them. Once I might have wanted to believe them. But I wasn't that kid anymore. So I asked the only question that mattered. If Tyler hadn't ruined everything, would you be standing here right now? Silence. If everything was still perfect, if you still had your money, your house, your golden son, would you have ever called me? More silence. That was all the answer I needed. Then my father's voice changed. He straightened his back, his old arrogance creeping in. Nathan, you're the eldest, the older brother. It's your duty to help your family. His tone wasn't pleading anymore. It was demanding. Like it was owed to him. Like I was still the same boy who used to beg for his approval. You're the only one who can fix this, he continued. You have money, connections. If you don't step up, what kind of son does that make you? I almost smiled. There it was. The real reason they were here. Not because they regretted how they treated me. Not because they suddenly cared. But because I was the only option left. I took a step forward, meeting their desperate gazes with the calmest expression I'd ever worn. So now you need me, right? Now I'm important? My voice was quiet but sharp. But tell me something. When I needed you, where were you? Neither of them spoke. I nodded, as if finally understanding something I had spent my whole life trying to figure out. Then, without another word, I stepped back and closed the door. Not just the door to my home, but the door to them, to my past, to the part of me that ever thought they would change. And I knew, at that moment, I would never look back. I thought it was over. That closing the door on my parents had ended it for good. But a few days later, there was another knock. This time it was Tyler. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't arrogant. He stood there, hunched over, his eyes red and swollen. His voice cracked as he spoke. Please, Nathan, I don't have anyone else. Mom and Dad are kicking me out. I crossed my arms, watching him. Tyler Carter, the golden child, the one who spent his whole life making mine miserable, was now standing in front of me, begging for help. He tried to hold on to something, anything. I was wrong. I know that now. But you're my brother, right? We're still family, right? I let out a quiet laugh. Not out of humor, but out of disbelief. I stepped forward, facing him fully. His eyes flickered with hope, like he thought I was about to forgive him. Instead, I looked him straight in the eye and said, Family? When was I ever family to you? His breath hitched, but I kept going. You stole my childhood. You made sure I never belonged anywhere. You never treated me like a brother. His face crumbled, but I wasn't done. And now? Now you're just getting a taste of what I lived through for years, and I don't owe you a damn thing. Tyler sank to his knees, shoulders shaking. But I felt nothing. No pity. No anger. Just finality. That was the last time I saw him. After that day, no one from the Carter family ever contacted me again. They simply vanished from my life, and for the first time, I wasn't tied down by them. I wasn't chasing their approval. I wasn't proving my worth to anyone. I was free. One night, sitting on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker, I finally understood something. Family isn't where you're born. It's where you're truly loved. I didn't regret my decision, and maybe, one day, I'd build a family of my own, the kind I actually deserved.